Hi, I'm Nevarda Smith. I'm a director of innovation with one of the largest rewards companies in America. I also have an extensive background in healthcare, in specifically health insurance and dealing with chronic care tracks for individuals who need to be on some sort of medication regime or just trying to keep them out of the emergency room, because here in America we've got some issues around the healthcare system, and we obviously don't want those individuals ending up in the emergency room wherever possible, especially if they can keep on their drug track. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about SAFE 4.0 and how I implemented that SAFE 4.0 at one of the largest healthcare or health insurers in America. So I was dealing with a situation where we were purely waterfall, and that waterfall approach to software development ran fairly well. We were highly successful in what we delivered. We didn't always deliver on time. The budgets weren't always maintained, and of course, scope creep was a problem that we dealt with on a daily basis, especially as we came into the end of the tracks. To compound the issues more, we also had a problem with dealing with a bunch of different suppliers of either healthcare data or a bunch of integration points that we had to deal with. Those integration points, of course, were outside of our frame of reference from my development groups that I put together, and we had to actually deal directly with those guys and make sure that the requirements were really, really rigid, because the contracts for those particular partners or providers actually was wrapped around delivering certain things to us, whether it was an API definition or what have you. So as scope started to change, which it always does, you start to have these problems with the partners not giving you what you needed, or you've got to go back through another round of things. And of course, integration was always a problem, and it was always done after everybody had done their development. So we faced all these issues. And I came across SAFE about, I'd say, 18 months ago. And it was something that I thought could deal with a lot of these problems that we're having with these partners. So we took a look at it and actually went through the training on it and found out that it could address some of the concerns that I was having. In particular, there's a process that we're going to get into that's called PI planning. And we'll get right into a session on PI planning at a later date, but today I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what's going on. The program increment planning, or what they call PI planning, actually brought all of the partners together, and we sat down in a room for about 2 days, and we started to go through the high-level vision and the capabilities of the system, and we would break those capabilities down into the feature sets that we would want to implement. Now, those feature sets didn't have to be very detailed. A small paragraph on what it was enough. And then we came together as a group, all in the same room. We had Skype sessions running for those people that were offshore and who couldn't actually travel to the on-site meeting. And we went through it and actually took a look at it together. And we all committed together. And the most important thing there was everybody understood what features we needed to do. And then we got into creating a set of acceptance criteria for each one of those features. And then we could be a lot more fluid in what it was that we were trying to build. We could make sure that the highest priority items were moved to the top, and we could deal with them that way. So what did the SAFE do for me? It actually gave me a framework that I could work from and get everybody to agree on exactly how we're going to approach the next set of software development. So today what I'm going to do is take a look at the bottom level here, which is really the team level, and that's important because this is really the foundation that you will build upon to get your software development out of the door. Anything that you see here is fully available on the Scaled Agile framework, and it's accompanying site, which is scaledagile.com. But this body of knowledge is open for anybody, and you can digest this, or you can purchase the Scaled Agile Framework book. I find that sometimes a book is really good because it's physical and you make a connection with it. It makes learning a little bit easier. Anything on the screen is interactive, so if you want to know what Scrum XP is, you can click on that. It's going to take you down into an article on Scrum, and then you can deal and take a look through that and understand what it is. Again, it's very detailed, and there's a lot of links throughout here, so you can actually understand what each section needs to do. So, for example, if I wanted to understand what a product owner is, I've got a link in here to product owner. But I can also go back to this tab here and take a look at the team structure here, and there's also another link here to product owner as well. So what you'll see is, this is highly interactive, it's an easy way to navigate, and you're never more than 2 clicks away from the information that you're looking for. I talked a little bit before about going through the team level, and I made a statement saying this is really the foundation that you're going to utilize to build upon your SAFe implementation. That's true to a point. Really, for a small organization, the program level is really what lifts you up to being able to get the most benefit out of SAFe 4.0. And you can implement as many of these levels as you want. You can either go to the portfolio level from an organization perspective level. If you're dealing with multiple release trains, which are these Scrum teams that get all on the release together to push these things out, you can actually take a look at the value stream as well. And if you want to expand that, you can take a look at the value stream. And I'm going to take you through each one of these as we go through. But for today, we're just going to take a look at a little bit at the bottom levels here. Around the outside, you're going to see a bunch of icons that you can click on here. There's a set of core values in the lean agile mindset here, along with the SAFe principles and actually implementing SAFe 4.0 here. Let's take a quick look at implementing SAFe. There's a 1, 2, 3 step is what they call it. And it's really about how do you get started. And the way you get started on this is really about this particular diagram here. You really got to go ahead and identify those people in your organization that can be actual change agents. And that's really the first thing that you need to do. And then you need to take some training on SAFe. And there's a product online from Dean Laughingwell who can actually give you the training. It's relatively inexpensive. I'll put a link down below in the bottom section down there so you can actually go to that. And again, if you want to get this in book format, I'll also put a link down below for that. So you can get that as well. But what it is, step 1 is really about identifying those change agents within your organization. As an innovation director and a person that deals with process all the time, whether it's going through workshops to expand on ideas that have come in and generate prototypes and put proof of concepts and actually take those things through to the market itself to get that tested, or whether it's a process change about how you actually building software and how do you build teams to support that software. This is really the type of person that you need to be looking at. We often call these type of people entrepreneurs, so they're inside of the organization. They're not entrepreneurs, they're intrapreneurs. They're working inside of the organization. So try to identify those people that are constant learners and who you think can train these up and are going to adopt this and give this a go. So that's really the first stage there. The next stage is after you've got your change agents in place and you've got everybody to agree from that perspective, it's really important that this message comes from the executive level down. So the next stage is really training the executives, and you can do that in a number of different ways. You could take them in with SAFe Angelist certification, but what I did personally was I put a series of workshops together, and I actually took them through the processes of where this is improving. And I really focused on the business results here. And executives are really good. They're looking at return on investment and what this is going to do. And you can take a look again at this and these business results, and you can map those back to the case studies that are actually out here on the SAFe Agile Framework website, and take a look at those case studies. And what I did was I created a set of decks where we took a look at the case studies at a really high level. I talked about the business values that and the business results that come along with that. You know, the time to market between 30 and 75%, and that was really true with me when I implemented this, especially with the partners. The cut down on the back and forth and the calls that we used to have to gather the requirements was really where we sped things up. Along with every 2 weeks we're doing a full integration test, and we're getting the actual feedback loop where we can adjust what we've done, because if it wasn't integrated and it didn't work, we could deal with it right then and there rather than waiting to the end of the process and dealing with it downstream when we would go into integration testing, or more than likely we weren't ready for integration testing and it would go into user acceptance testing period of time where we would start to do all those integrations. The second thing is the quality just goes up, and it goes up again by 25 to 75%. And I would say the quality of what I saw increasing really from the requirements level all the way down to the delivery of the software itself really went up, probably about the 40 to 50% decrease in the number of defects that our customers are actually finding. So I think the quality in my particular case was right smack in the middle of that range there. The productivity went up. I think what went up with productivity, and something that's not mentioned here, is the stress level of the individuals that are working on the projects actually came down. And I really saw that in the QA department. And the QA guys would normally be brought into the process really late in the game. They really wouldn't understand what the requirements were. They need to write their test cases and execute their test cases. So they were dealing with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of late to the game understanding about what it was that we were trying to produce. So I think along with the productivity that you're going to also see the stress levels come down. The last point here, we had a 50 to 10%. I really think this should be around the other way, a 10 to 50% engagement increase. And the engagement can be measured with the number of turnovers that you have, along with how engaged the individuals are, and then you go back to your productivity. An engaged employee is always going to produce a lot better quality. They're going to move things a lot quicker. They're going to be up for the challenges to make those things. So training the executives, you put together this, or you can do the Angelist certification, which helps them understand what's going on here. Again, I took them through a series of case studies. I took them through the return on the investments to get their push back in. They then announced to the company that this was a direction that we were going to follow and push that down to the rest of the teams. The third stage is really taking the train itself, and that's really about talking and leading the teams to launch that first train. And again, we're going to get right into the details around launching the train, but it's important to know at this point that you've got executive level and managers and leaders, most importantly, supporting this change, and you're all working together. The first release train that you actually set up and run is going to be a difficult time. It's going to be a time of learning. It's going to be a time of adapting. It's going to be a time of trying to throw away the baggage from the old waterfall models. And you're going to hear a lot coming back from your team members about, hey, this is never going to work, or this doesn't work here this way, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. I often push that back on my teams as I'm putting them together with those types of statements, and I say, you know what, let's write that down as a challenge area, and then let's brainstorm. Let's take a session on these challenge areas and see how we can solve it. I think the last thing you're going to see here is once this is in place, you're going to see the teams all of a sudden becoming more collaborative. They're going to feel like they're delivering together. My personal experience was I had separate teams in a large organization, again, the largest healthcare insurer in America, coming together to need to deliver something. And they didn't really feel like one team. We had people out on the West Coast, we had them on the East Coast, we were North and South, and everyone was distributed. And what we had to do was bring those people together so they felt like one team. And there's many ways to do that. You have some of the leaders come in for that PI planning, which is the program increment planning, to work with you. You try to bring in as many people as you can. And those that can't, you set up the automatic streaming over Skype business, and you use that and you get them involved that way. And the breakout sessions also are very important to get the understanding. And then at the end of it, really the amount of people that are going to come back and actually commit to what it is that you're planning. So this is really the first section, which is implementing SAFe 1, 2, 3, and about training and actually kicking these particular release trains off. So if I go back again to the overall framework here, it's important to understand that, again, you can click around any of these areas, but they're really based on a set of core values. And the core values come from a combination of the Agile Manifesto and some of the things that the SAFe group has come up with themselves as well. But you can really take a look at the core values here. It's about built-in quality. It's about being transparent. It's about program execution and alignment. And you can read each one of these sections if you really want to. But I just wanted to show again that you're able to click on any of these sections and come in and take care of that. Once you've taken a look at the core values, I think the next section is really the most important here. And this is a foundation piece that you really need to start with. These are the SAFe principles themselves. And over the next 9 weeks or so, I'm going to take you through each one of these so you can get a little bit of an understanding about what they are and how they work. So the first one's really about taking an economic view. And again, it's clickable, so let's click on it and find out what it says. And taking an economic view is really about being a goal for dealing with things that can be sustainable and have the shortest lead time. So there's a little bit of a calculation that you can do here that actually determines which ones you should be working on. But if we take a look at this diagram here, we can tell a look about delivering early and often. And I will mention here that I used to have a manager that I worked for, and he was always about trying to deliver early and often. He would say this all the time, and the reason he said this was because at each one of these delivery points, you're constantly adding incremental value. So you can see the difference here. At the top here, we've got the waterfall, and you would come in, and maybe it's a 6-month or 9-month project, maybe it's a 12-month project, and the first half of that or the first quarter of that was gathering the requirements. And these documents were done, and the BAs did all their work, and you had all the calls come together, and the set of documents came out, and at that point, all we've got is a set of documentation. Yes, the customer might have signed off on it. Yes, the partners might have signed off on it, but the interpretation of those documents is up for debate. You don't really know what it is that they're trying to achieve, no matter how thorough the documentation is. Then you would come through and the developers would get it and we'd be thrown over the fence, and we'd actually start to look at what was going on in those documents, and we designed this elaborate architecture to support this new feature set that we were putting online. And you would go in there and you would construct it, and you'd pick the frameworks that you'd use, and maybe you'd say, hey, there's this new Angular 4.0 out there and we want to bring that in. So we'd start to build all this stuff, and then we'd go into implementation and start to develop it. And then all of a sudden you've got an unverified built system built on documents that might have been right, might have been up for debate, might have been misunderstood by multiple partners. And you'd see this very unverified system come to life right here at this point. Then all of a sudden you bring your QA team in and say, start QAing this. Now maybe they were getting involved a little bit earlier on, maybe some over the implementation as well, but they're working off the same documents that the developers were working off. So they're trying to QA a system based on what they understood it to be. And they created a set of test cases based on those documents, which by the way, now might be 9 months old. And once they're 9 months old, how true are those requirements now? Things have moved. The market has shifted. The Apple Watch came out. The system integration points may have changed. Maybe there's some new vendors out there that are offering better API integration. You're now stagnant for 9 months, and you can't afford to be doing that in this market. So they would come in, they do the verification, then we get out there and try to get into user acceptance testing, and then all of a sudden, the $5 million project or whatever it was would come through to the system itself, and the customer would say, well, that's not what I asked for. So what would happen at that point is you'd get all these requirement changes, and then you would jam code in at the last minute, and of course the quality of that was hard coding to get it out there, and some sort of system that resembled something close to what they were doing. Now if we take a look at the incremental delivery model, we can do something slightly different. After 2 weeks, we deliver an incremental integrated system. So we take a slice of the application and we build it, and we test it, and we integrate it, and we test it some more. And what you're going to end up with is little chunks of functionality that are developed and pushed out onto the single code branch, and your partners can drive right into the same code branch, and they know when they break the build. Now what supports this? There's a couple of important things. Number one is build automation, so thinking about DevOps, right? And number two is test automation. So I'm a real proponent of moving the QA resources into a highly automated testing mode. So that means instead of spending the time writing and executing test cases, they need to write the test cases and then build test automation that sits directly on top of the software. On top of that, you should be doing test-driven development, which is writing the unit tests as code first, so when you check the code in, it can tell you what is broken and what hasn't been implemented yet. So if you get those two things in place, you're going to be highly successful at this point. So look at this first thing. What are we delivering here? We're delivering a bunch of value. we're delivering incremental value after the first 2 weeks. You move into the next sprint, we're delivering some more value. But right in between here, and we'll get into this when we talk about it further, right in between here, you're going to see extra value coming back in because you're going to be doing a demo, the customer's going to be seeing it, everybody's there, including the partners, and that demo is going to tell you how far off the actual requirements you really were. Now you've got an availability to adapt, right? So you think about the plan, do, check, adapt cycle. So you basically do the development work, you get that feedback, and you can change it is because you haven't done a lot of code at this point, and it's very easy to adapt. You can even adapt the underlying architecture that needed to support it, and SAFE's a big proponent of adapting the design of the application, adapting the architecture of the application as the development progresses through and as the value is being added. So as you can see here, this box of value is getting larger and larger and larger. And if you really think about it, if this was a 9-month waterfall project, and let's say we were 2 months late because of the big gap that we had in the real understanding of the system versus the implemented understanding of the system, you can see here that we're delivering to the market constant additional value that you don't even get in the waterfall model until the end of the 9 months, or if again you're going to run late because it's probably not fully understood, you may even be 2 months later. Now, does that say we get it right all the way along? No, it doesn't. What it says to us is we've got the ability built into the process to get that feedback. Again, we want to be delivering early and often an integrated system so we can get that feedback and get that value out to the market. We will be able to adapt at those points, and that's highly important. So you can take a look at it here. The waterfall model, right, it really begins at the delivery date. That's when the value hits the market, and it tries to deliver all the value at once. But you can see by the line here, it's really missing the target. What the value is on the incremental value is we're adding this piece of value, and this value's here, and that might be 2 weeks, it may be after a month, after 2 sprints, but you get that out to the market. The market's using it. The market's also providing feedback, and that value stays all the way through the 9-month project. Or in this particular case, let's say this is a month, and we basically got 6 months of value coming out of here. And after 1 month, we pushed out to the market some value. That value sticks around. After the second month, we've doubled our value. 3rd month or 4th month here, we've got 3 times the value, 4 times the value in the 5th month, and 6 times the value in the 6th month. Which is really the 5 times the value in the 6th month. And it's going to be more on track because at each one of these points, you had the ability to adapt and change as it needed to be changed. So what is this? The market value of a feature. So it's really talking about some of the value that goes out to the market, and the fact that if you're not first to market, then the value of that feature starts to decline as time moves on. And we all know that everything's changing very, very quickly in this market. And so we've got to be on the game. We've got to do things like innovation workshops. We've got to be ahead of the market, because if we're not, there's 2 guys in a garage thinking up an idea and trying to get it out to the market before the big corporation can. So we need to act a little bit more like a startup, and we need to do that by being able to build things quickly and get that feedback loop, which I talked about before. There's a little bit of understanding the economic trade-offs here between cycle time, the product cost time, the development expense, and the value. And it's really important that the risk here is the uncertainty of the technical or the business viability of the solution. And that risk can be mitigated by getting that feedback very, very early, right? So if you think about not delivering it to the end, it might be 9 months before you get there. That risk gets increasing over that 9 months because you're investing more and more money as you go through that, right? So the development expense in this particular case, as the waterfall project goes on, gets very, very gets higher. So if it's a $5 million project, you're spending all that $5 million before you get that $5 million worth of value to the customer, and then you could figure out that it didn't do what it needed to do, and that would all have to come back. The cycle time to implement, again, is the lead time to the market. Again, on a 9-month waterfall project, it's going to be 9 months. On a 9-month, a set of program increments that run over a 9-month period, you're getting value every 2 or 4 weeks, depending on how you decide you're pushing to production. Again, delivering early and often. The cycle time to implement is really the capability. Again, it's around the lead time to get that particular capability to the market. And then the product cost is really about how does it, what's the cost of the goods that are sold. And again, if you're not getting the deployment and the operational costs somewhat offsetted by some of the value that's out in the market, then you're going to have a situation where you've got all this cost, and again, that risk just continues to increase. So that's really a little bit about principle 1. The next one's apply systems thinking. And again, I'll get right into details of these these 9 principles at a later date, but that's a little bit of an overview of it. So system thinking, really quickly, and I'll speed up a little bit here, is about how do you tackle your organization, right? So is it optimized to be able to push out the value stream to the market as quickly as possible? So you might have your DevOps guys, you might have your architecture group, you might have your developers, you might have your business analyst group, and really what you got to do is think about how do you get the system all out together, and how do those people work across the system, right? So bringing them all in together so that they're all working on the same release train with the same goals. So if you take a look at it here, what you can see is that the value stream itself is really a portion of waiting time, right? So if you're pushing something through the system right now, whether it's a request to get some software installed on a developer, the time it takes to get through the organization system for that is not really the installation time. It's really about the request and the waiting and the approvals that it needs to go to, and everything else that goes along with the process itself to actually get that out. So if you take a look at it, maybe in this particular case here, and this is just one example of taking something through from request to deployment. You know, the request went in, there was an email supervisor that had to approve it. The request took an hour to create. The request took 1 hour to review and approve. The request needed technical assessment and went through that cycle. It took an hour to assess that particular technical statement. It took maybe an hour to go through and get that request and code and test that request. And then we went through a verification, and it took another hour. And then we deployed it. So all up, this one small request, small feature, had 11 hours worth of actual work time, right? But when you take a look at going through the organization, right, and actually going from business analyst or customer into the cycle where the business analyst moves it across, and are we going to approve this feature? Yes, we are. And then technical assessment about how we do that feature itself needs to get involved, and then it comes across to code and unit test. You can see the wait times here. Maybe we only meet once every week to discuss the requests that are coming in and decide which ones are going to be approved. Maybe the approval guys only meet every 2 weeks, and there's a 2-week lag there. Maybe to even get on the technical assessment, it takes another 2 weeks. And then by the time it gets into code and test, we're working on other things. We also need to bring that in. So you're looking at it again, you know, another week and then another week. And when you look at it overall, even though it's 11 hours worth of work, if people just sat down and did it, it's really taking us 7 weeks to get that particular thing through the system itself. So what you got to think about here is how do you structure your organization? And we'll get into that, but how do you structure the organization to deliver the value in the quickest possible time? And that's really comes about in applying systems thinking and taking a slice of the organization so you can work efficiently as a collaborative cross-development team, that's cross-discipline team, and actually get that out to the market. I do a lot of work like that when I'm actually building a team. When I'm building a team for innovation, I put that team together that's got cross-functional capabilities. There's people in there that that have got test capabilities, automation capabilities, development capabilities. There's business analyst capabilities. There's DevOps capabilities. There's interaction with the client capabilities in bringing that client in through those workshops to address those concerns and those feature sets. So it's really, I take that view, you've got to have a cross-collaborative team to actually move that stuff forward. So, assume variability. So this one's really, really simple. We know things are going to change, and as those things actually start to change, what happens to us? We've got to be able to adapt. So how do you do that? You do that by having the design of the application start to evolve as it is needed. It's only needs to be slightly ahead. You don't have to go and build this big architected system to build some software before you start any of the work. What you need to do is try a few things out. You need to get that feedback loop going and then inspect and adapt on that feedback loop, right? So what you really want to do is know that the variability is going to come, know the late requirements are going to come, know that there's going to be changes, so go ahead and plan for it and preserve those options so you can deal with it as you go through. So at the start, you can have multiple design options, and you start with those, and you only build out the ones you need to build out as you're moving through the system. These learning points of feedback, again, it's about integrated systems every 2 weeks, getting that feedback loop, then knowing whether or not you need to tweak your design. And in the end, you end up with a design that matches what the system needs itself. If you take a single option approach, you don't know which one of these designs you need to take, and you pick one of them. Let's say we pick the second to the last one here because we think that's the best. We built in the latest and greatest feature set from Angular 4.0, and we brought in an architect of a web API brand new toolkit, and we've done we've spun it up in IBM Bluemix, which we thought was great, and it is great, and you bring that up. And what ends up happening is you pick this solution, you build the foundation before you've delivered any value. Now, as things go on, you now need to adjust, right? Because when you start to get this thing delivered, you've built in, you were supposed to be here. Well, guess what? Had you done an inspect and adapt right here, you would have said, well, we needed to adapt, right? But you're not getting that feedback, so you don't know you need to adjust. So you stay on this line, and then all of a sudden, this is really the solution you should have picked, which was one of these ones that was adapted as it moved forward. And now you've got too much to adapt, and you've got to add another 2-3 months to the project to change the underlying framework, and on top of that, all the code that relies on that framework. So that's really what it's about, is that you know that change is going to come, you know you need to assume the variability of the product, and the core system needs to adapt to that as it goes through as well. That's principle 3. Take a look at principle 4, which is build incrementally with fast. And this is what I've been going over in all of these principles. I think this is the most important principle there is. You've got to build incremental. You've got to build fast. You've got to have integrated test cycles, right? And so what does that mean? There's a diagram in here, right? And it's really the plan, do, check, and adapt cycle. And you want to bring those in. The more frequently you can do that, the faster the feedback comes in, the faster you can adapt, and the faster you can plan and actually do again. So this is what it's about. I'd much rather have 2 weeks in between fully integrated cycles than just one, because the further along the track you are, the less time you're going to have to be able to adapt, and you are going to push stuff in quickly. So let's get those integration points put in place. Let's make sure the software's integrated, and we run that test, and we run those builds, and we run that automation, and we get that feedback. And then most importantly, we take it in front of the customer, and the customer gives us those feedbacks, and then we can adapt to that right here. So if you take a look at it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got eight adaptable time cycles, or 8 adaptable feedback loops that are going to come back to you here. In this particular one, you've got 1, and I guess the final one, and then you could even take it to the extreme, which is waterfall, which is at the top here. It's 1 plan, do, act, plan, do, check, adapt cycle, and what you end up with there is a massive system that needs a lot of changes to make the customer happy. So again, build it incrementally, have fast integrated learning cycles so you get that feedback that comes back to you. The next one is base milestones on active working systems, on objective working systems, right? So what does this mean? This basically means that you get those systems, you get them up and running, and everybody delivers within the sprint together. That way you've got the integration working for you, and you're actually pushing out software that either works or doesn't work. So this is absolutely important, and it's really about, if all you're doing is waiting to the end with waterfall, right? You've got requirements complete, design completes, development completes, testing, blew up. All these changes need to be made. Failure, failure, failure. Integration's not working. APIs need to be changed on both sides. There might not be the feature sets that are needed. The data might not be needed. Might not even be there. Wouldn't it have been nice to know that up here while we're doing some of the requirements? To actually know that, hey, we didn't identify all of the data set that we would need to make this going, right? So what you see here is each one of these cycles has this demo, and the demo is an integrated system. Everybody comes to it, and then that feedback loop can be brought back on you. So you can actually do this. And again, you can only measure and evaluate a system once it's working. I can't come to you with just a screen design and sign off on it, because I don't know how that connects to the data at the back end of the system, and the APIs that need to sit on top of that, and the frameworks that need to get that data out to the customer, whether it's web API, whether it needs to be behind a firewall or whatever. The next one is visualizing and limiting work in progress, which is WIP, and reducing batch size and manage queue length, because queues are bad. So basically, we're going to have to talk a lot about this one, but at a high level, this is really about limiting to the pieces of work that actually go through the system. Small batches always go through a system better and faster than large batches. There's an exercise that we can take you through when you get through this, and I can write it up on the whiteboard, and we can talk about that a little bit more in detail. But really what you got to remember is, if you use a Kanban board with your team, and you get your team all on that Kanban board, you want to make sure they're working on 1, 2, or 3 things at a maximum of 3 at one point in time. And everybody needs to chip in. That cross-collaborative team needs to chip in to deliver that piece of work. It's much better to have that in. The classic case is, if you've got a developer, there was 3 things in the queue for the sprint. Those 3 things are all done. What's that developer going to do? He thinks he's a developer. He's going to go back out and say, I'm going to bring in some more work. What does that do? There's a lot of work in progress. There's a lot of development in progress. Now all of a sudden we brought more unfinished work into the system. What that developer should do is actually go and write some automated tests for that other work, chip in to do some development work, or take a look at some test cases that he needs to write. Maybe there's some work that needs to be done on the DevOps as well, to make sure that when they're checking the stuff in, it's automatically being built. But again, you need to be working within that work in progress, and only push the work in progress through the sprint, and make sure that everything gets delivered. Because at the end of the day, if you've got too much work in progress, you're never going to finish anything. You're not going to get to that integrated test cycle, and you're not going to get that feedback loop going on. And that's really what this is about. It's about identifying that optimum batch size to cost, and push those things through as fast as possible. Managing the queue lengths is really about how long can those queues be, right? So a really massive queue is going to be daunting for everybody. So making sure that you have your intake funnel nice and manageable, right? So the feature set that are coming in. So only go ahead and pull in what you can do. Now, if you want to get into this a little more detail, and we will do it, you talk about Little's law, and it's really about the law of queuing theory, and it talks about the longer the queue is, the bigger the variability of that queue, and the higher the variability of that queue, the more things that are in that queue, the longer it's going to take to get that queue through the system. So what do? You break it down into smaller chunks so you can push it through the system faster. Apply Cadence and synchronize with cross-domain planning. This is really another one of the key things that is with the SAFe 4.0 framework. It's really about bringing everybody together, right? So what are you doing? You've got your DevOps people that are trying to support you. You bring them on the same exact sprint as you're dealing with. You've got your partners that you need to deal with that are delivering some APIs for you. Those partners are outside your organization. You make sure they're on two 2-week sprints as well, and everybody starts a sprint on the same day and everyone finishes a sprint on the same day, and then you plan out all of the demos and you plan out all of the program increments so that there's a calendar that's published for everybody that's involved in this, and you work through that process, right? And you make sure that those things are synchronized. And what does synchronization do for you? It allows you to do the do, check, adjust, and plan again, or plan, do, check, and adjust, iteration after iteration. If you're not synchronized and your sprints aren't synchronized, that thing has to realign. So if one team's on a 3-week sprint and another team's on a 2-week sprint, then the most you're going to be able to synchronize up is every 6 weeks. Those things will align. Well, that's too long. So what we want to do is go to a 2-week sprint. We want everyone on a 2-week sprint. We want everyone committing to delivering their work that they've taken and committed to in those 2 weeks, so that we can actually get that check and adjust cycle happening as quickly as possible with that feedback loop of an integrated system. The next one is really unlocking the intrinsic value or motivation of knowledge workers. So knowledge workers also work for money, but you'll see that they also work for just solving problems and solving puzzles. So if you keep them motivated at that basic level with a limited amount of work, and they're delivering constant value to the market, that in itself is something that makes them feel really good. Now, for the developers that are out there, if you think about it this way, how did it feel to get to an end of a project, even dealing with the 60-hour release weekend because nothing was going right? You're fixing stuff on the fly and then you push it out to the market. You feel this sense of relief, you feel this sense of enjoyment, you feel this sense of accomplishment. This is what it's about on a 2-week sprint. You're going to get that feeling every 2 weeks. You're going to get that feeling every 4 weeks if that's when you actually deliver value to the market. You're providing functionality constantly to the market, and your application's constantly evolving. So it's really about understanding the role of what compensation plays in this section. And it's like money is not the only motivator that goes on. So sure, there's some guys out there that just want to earn more and more money, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be fulfilled. Fulfill comes from delivering high quality code to the customer and everybody being happy about what's being delivered. And again, we talk about more details when we get in there. And then the last principle, which is the foundation of SAFe 4.0, is really about decentralizing decision making. The best people that understand the system are those that are working on the system. It's no good to continue to escalate to a manager. The first thing you want to do is push all those decisions that can be done at the line level to the line level. And how does that come about? It comes about with collaboration, cross-collaboration, having all of the people working together for the same goal, for the same sprint goals, and for the same integrated test cycles. So you want to decentralize as many of those decisions as you can down lower. You shouldn't be escalating to management unless something's really gone bad, and then the management needs to get involved to deal with those things. But again, if you can make those decisions, you want to push them down. Now, SAFe gives you a way to actually do that. And this is just a quick way of going through it, and we'll get into the details of it. But just know you can go out here and you can actually take a look at each one of the decisions that need to be made, and you can talk about the frequency, that if it's time critical, and then look at the economies of scale, saying whether it would be better to make that decision elsewhere. And you can come up with just a simple thing to put forward that deals with 98% of the cases out there. You can either say centralize that decision or push it down to the workers and decentralize it. Anything in a 4 to 6, you want to push that down. So there's a calculation you can use in here to deal with that. So that is the overview really of SAFe principles 1 through 9. Again, there's a lot here that you can take a look at. I advise everybody to go out there and take a look at it. Start with the outer edge here, taking a look at the Lean Agile mindset, the SAFe principles that we went through, the implementing 1, 2, 3, which is around the training. Look at the community of practice and Lean Agile. And next time we meet, we'll start to talk about the team level, and then we'll talk about the program level. We'll leave the value level till the end, and then we'll talk a little bit about portfolio level and what you do at an organization level. And that's really, really important to drive the value and the vision and the mission of the company down into the systems, and taking all of the money that's being spent right now, bringing it to the top and making sure that everyone's deciding which are the best projects to work on. So thank you again for joining me. Again, my name's Nevarda Smith. I look forward to teaching you some more about SAFe next time we meet. Thanks.